I evoke the element fire to assert the will of my desire. With water, I evoke connection with kindred souls and self-reflection. I evoke the element earth to manifest abundant worth. Of air, I conjure knowledge and reason to know the cycles and the seasons. As above, so below, I free my spirit that I may grow. Alchemists of light and dark, on life's adventure we embark.
Affluence Alchemist, it's Afira here, back for another interview episode of the podcast. And today I am joined with another one of my past clients, Luchiana Lyra, who is the magical human being behind the Possibility Department. So if you're not already following her on Instagram, definitely do it. You will not regret it. Basically, she creates these little, I want to call them oracle cards, but they're not even really like your basic bitch oracle cards. They're literally just like these amazing cards that cause you to think about the magic of everyday life. There's really no way to explain it. You just have to go and look at them because they're so freaking cool. Luchiana joined me for Wealthy Witch Biz Bootcamp, which is my business course. And ever since that time, we've kind of been working with each other and helping to grow her business from something that started off as sort of a random project that was making a few dollars a month to something that is actually, turning into a real career for her. And it's just so exciting to see her growth. She is recently getting an actual deck published, which is so exciting. And I just wanted to bring her on the show to talk a little bit about what it's really like to go through the journey of having a dark night of the soul and then realizing that art or creativity or intuition or curiosity about life can bring you out of that darkness, and then also using that creativity and that inspiration to help other people, because that's essentially what she does with her programs and with her cards. So excited to introduce you to Luchiana. And just so you guys know, as usual, just like I say in every episode, if you want to experience what this sort of thing is like, to turn your life around from, maybe feeling like your magical life and your mundane life are super separate and that things are not really mushing together in the interconnected way that you feel like it should be, that is exactly what Alchemy of Affluence Academy is for. So if you are interested in that, you can now join for as little as $39 a month. So that will, of course, be linked associated with this video. And without further ado, let us go ahead and jump into this episode with Luchiana. Luchiana is the head of the Possibility Department, which is a society of spiritual seekers and self-development junkies, and she's dedicated to shifting the mindset of her clients through cards, meditations, and programs specifically designed to push the limits of perception by opening up to infinite possibility and practicing reverence for our current reality, which is so important. So, welcome, Luchiana.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, so here goes. We're going to do our rapid fire witchy questions. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Okay, cool. So first things first, do you call yourself a witch?
I don't. I feel like I almost haven't earned the title, if that makes sense. I just recently started calling myself an occultist. So I see myself as someone who's studying it, even though I've been studying it for probably 10 years now, or maybe more. But I still feel like I haven't earned it in a real weird way. I feel like witches are very dedicated to their rituals, and I'll go through phases where I'm totally undedicated and everything I do is really psychological, if that makes sense.
I like that, though. I feel like occultist kind of has a different mysterious ring to it. I love that word.
Yeah, I was honestly thinking of I just recently kind of rebranded, and before I still had a lot of fear around really diving into the occult and the whole witch niche. which is so crazy because like all my following are witches, like all of them. But I still had like so much fear around going into that. And I thought about calling myself a witch and introducing the brand that way, but it just didn't feel right yet. Like I felt like I personally wasn't there yet. And so in my research, I found the term occultist, which basically just means someone who believes in like this mysterious X factor, believes in some form of magic and studies it. And I'm like, that's me. So yeah. I feel really comfortable with it.
Yeah, it totally suits you. So like, what is your definition of that magic or like that mystery?
I feel like people think that magic is, I don't know, something that just kind of like instantly swoops in and saves the day. But I see it as this kind of mysterious force that you're co-creating with. And to me, all of the possibilities are open. You know, it could be just a force. It couldn't have, you know, maybe a body, or maybe it's a god, or maybe it's a goddess, or maybe it's neither. I don't know what it is, but I know that it exists from my personal experience, and I don't really ever slap a label on it.
I love that. Not putting labels on things just has a special magicalness to it that you just don't get with labels.
Right. I mean, when you leave it open that way, you know, there are some days where I'm feeling particularly like goddessy. I love Artemis. I have like a little Artemis altar, and I don't even necessarily believe that she as a woman exists, but I can kind of like tap into that archetype. And then there are other days where I wake up and I say like a traditional Catholic prayer that I learned in Portuguese when I was young, and I'll listen to like Catholic hymns. So for me, it's all the same, and I feel like it's whatever you're feeling is going to be the most powerful.
That is so true, because it all starts with what you're feeling in your heart. Otherwise, magic doesn't really work.
That's exactly it, yeah.
So what is your favorite witchy movie or TV show?
I'm going to have to be basic and say Harry Potter, just because.
I mean, it's basic, but in a good, like the best possible way.
I feel like Harry Potter, like by the end of the books and the movie, the message is that the real magic is like friendship and bravery and loyalty and love. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's almost like all that other stuff. It's like cool accessories with the wands and everything, but nothing would be accomplished if you didn't have those solid building blocks. So I really like that message. I guess that's why. That, and I love the art direction. I'm like obsessed with it.
That is so true. Like Harry Potter is the most ridiculously extravagant, like magical, like supernatural movie ever. But when you think about it, nobody would be so obsessed with it if it wasn't just about those basic human emotions and like dynamics. That's so true.
It's the connections, really.
Yeah. I watch Harry Potter, or like try to get through reading the books. I usually fail at that. But like I try to do some Harry Potterism like at least once a year, because I find that it just brings me back to like my why factor. You know, it just kind of brings me back to the basics, kind of like you were saying. So good. So good.
Yeah. Never going to let it go. I actually still haven't read the 7th one, like the last one. I'm saving it for my deathbed. Everyone thinks I'm crazy. I don't want it to end.
That's actually super funny, because my younger sister was like, she's a little younger than me, so she kind of had this impressionable childlike nature to her as the Harry Potters were coming out. And when she was a little kid, she said that she always imagined that as the credits were going up on the last Harry Potter movie, that would just be the end of the world. Like that was the moment of the apocalypse. Like the first day that it was shown in theaters and the first time the credits rolled, that's just it. Like
that's the end of the world. That's so funny.
I mean, it kind of felt like it, but we're getting by anyway. It's fine.
Yeah.
So you kind of touched upon this when you were talking about your definition of magic, but like, what are your thoughts on like the gods and goddesses?
Most days I see them as an archetype that you can kind of tap into, like that energy. And then sometimes I think that everyone interprets divinity in a different way. And that's why we have so many different interpretations of divinity. That's why there are so many gods and goddesses across so many pantheons. So sometimes I think, what if there's this one force and we're all just interpreting it in the best way that we know? You know what I mean? Because there's a lot of cultural things that go with each deity as well. Like a deity that's Indian isn't necessarily going to make sense to, I don't know, maybe a small French girl. If you show her that deity, she might be like, that doesn't make sense to me. But if you show her Jesus or something else, it's more familiar to her. It makes sense to her. So sometimes I feel that we're all talking about the exact same thing, and it's one force. We're just all interpreting it in different ways, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I totally agree. And I love that example of like, what is like a little girl in Europe going to think? You know what I mean? Because nowadays we have so many gods and goddesses, and everyone in the witchy community wants to be like, I need to learn all of the gods and all of the gods, but at the end of the day, it's just about that connection of like knowing that you're a part of something, and that something kind of has maybe relatable qualities to a human.
Yeah.
And you just kind of put that into some kind of a story. And other than that, I feel like it kind of just gets wildly misconstrued.
Yeah, no, for sure. I feel like I guess maybe divinity is something so big and so expansive that we put it in human containers to where we can understand it. Mm-hmm. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. So on that note, do you believe in fairies and or ghosts?
I don't deny the possibility of anything, but I've never had like any fairy experience or anything like that. Ghosts, I have had experiences, so yes, I do. But I don't deny the existence that there could be some form of like earth spirit.
Okay, tell us a quick ghost story. Like, I don't see them. So anytime somebody tells me that they do, I'm like, I need to know. Tell me the story.
I don't see anything. I never see anything. I think one of the first big ones happened when I was a kid. We had moved to this house that wasn't even that old. It was built in like the 70s. But for some reason, we all felt weird in that house. Like we all felt off, and we were all afraid to like go downstairs at night for some reason. There was a lot of weird things about that house. And there was one night, it was Christmas, I was sleeping, and like we had this TV room, and sometimes I would fall asleep in there watching TV. And I unplugged the Christmas lights because I'm really obsessive about things like that. I'm always afraid there's going to be a fire. Still am to this day. So I unplugged the Christmas lights, I turned off the TV, and I turned off like this little train that I've had since I was a kid. The train goes around the tree. And there's like the tiniest little on and off button that you have to like use your nail to kind of like pry on. And I woke up that night at 3 a.m. with the Christmas lights plugged in and the train going around the tree like on the fastest speed. And then I walked down the hall and I heard a door creak. And so I'm looking all around asking my sister if she's awake, like shaking her, and she's like, leave me alone, I'm asleep, my parents are asleep, everyone's asleep. And I just turned everything off and like sat there for like an hour unable to sleep. So that was one thing that kind of like made me believe. And then recently I went to a bar in Memphis, and I just had the most terrifying experience. We went into this room and we started drinking, and all of a sudden, like I won't get into details, but all of a sudden I just started seeing this woman like being stabbed to death. Like it got really, really graphic, and I started crying. Like I just started crying. I started bawling my eyes out, like from the bottom of my soul. I cried for 10 minutes. I started feeling like pain in my back. And then I came to find out that it was like one of the most haunted bars in Memphis. I guess it used to be, I don't know, some sort of like parlor or something like that. But apparently a lot of stuff had happened there. And I cried for 10 minutes. And then the next morning I had like just a ton of pain in my back. I was super depressed for like the whole day. It was a really weird experience. But Yeah.
Interesting. So like you saw them as if they were like real people, or like how did that look?
So it was basically like all of a sudden my head felt really heavy to the point where like I had to close my eyes, if that even makes sense. And I kind of just started playing like a movie in my mind.
Oh,
And this woman was, again, it's graphic, but I was seeing all of it happening. And then I started feeling the pain of where it happened to her. And
oh,
I didn't feel afraid because I felt like it was someone trying to tell me their story, but I felt really sad and I felt really, I don't know, I felt just really, really sad. Like I couldn't stop crying. I cried for 10 minutes straight and I'm not a crier. And so the next day I didn't want to go back in because I felt like it was going to be really overwhelming. But the next day I bought like white roses and I left it on the doorstep of the bar and I wrote them a note saying like, hey, can you put this in this room? Because I had an experience there. And then I saw it later on their Instagram, and apparently that's something that happens a lot, is that people see different things that happened. But yeah, that if I hadn't been a believer before, I was definitely a believer after that, because there was no other reason for me to start seeing all this random stuff unless I was going insane, which is a possibility, I guess.
that is just crazy. Like I've heard stories like that about certain haunted buildings where people just experience the weirdest stuff. That's so weird.
I think, I don't know, I think maybe if someone suffers a terrible death, maybe they're kind of stuck there and they just want people to hear their story. You know, if you died without being able to, I don't know, tell your family or tell your friends, this is what happened to me, this is how it happened. Maybe they're just kind of like stuck there trying to share their story with people. And maybe it's not really something to be afraid of. You know, maybe they just need to be heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that. Like, don't necessarily be afraid. They're not trying to harm you. They're just like every person like needs their story to be told.
Right. It's interesting.
Super interesting. Okay, so what is your favorite divination tool?
You know, it's a pendulum now, and that's because of you.
Yes. Pendulum. It's like always nearby.
It's just so simple and so easy to keep in your pocket. And it's funny because I picked my first one up, I want to say like 4 years ago. And then, I don't know, I just didn't really like connect with it. I used it for a little bit, had some fun, and then like put it away. And then I think it was when I took your course, I think you have a module that includes it.
I try to include it wherever I can.
Right, yeah, you're just like pendulums for everyone. But I started using it kind of in like business and time management decisions, and I became kind of addicted because that's a big problem that I have is I'll sit there and try to figure out how to manage my time, and I'm the giant to-do list kind of person. And so, I don't know, I feel like I just pick at all these different things and get nothing done. But by using the pendulum, it kind of gives me clarity on what exactly needs to be done at what time.
Mm-hmm. Oh my gosh, me too. We could talk about this for the whole episode, but let's not do that because everyone's already heard it. So what is your daily magical practice like?
So I was terrible at this. So I actually created a worksheet like for myself that includes basically all the points that I want to hit on, but in like kind of a condensed space because I still have a job that I go to in the morning. So it has to be like a 20-minute deal. And I started kind of like formulating what are the things that I want to include in this practice. And so I have like, I always record my dreams because I feel like that's super important. It kind of sets me up for my day. I kind of step outside and observe like what's going on with the weather, like what does it look like outside, what animals do I see, just kind of like connecting that way. And then I do a little bit of journaling, but it's basically all structured by this worksheet that has it just like step by step, which I guess to some people could seem rigid, but I feel like when you're trying to have a spiritual practice and you know, you have to be at work in like 30 minutes, you kind of need something that's going to give you like, okay, now we're going to do this, this, and that. And I walk away feeling so much better every single time, as rigid as it may be.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's rigid at all. In fact, one of my mentors was recently talking about the concept of like structure creates freedom in a sense.
Yeah.
You know, because like when you just have too many different options, you can get analysis paralysis, or you can just kind of get pulled in too many different directions. But when you create structure and you create kind of like this non-negotiable system of some kind, then you have the freedom to fully immerse yourself in whatever that is, knowing that you don't have to think too hard about like how it's all going to fit together, because you already know how it's going to fit together. So I actually love that. It's like a perfect balancing of masculine and feminine energy.
Well, thank you. That's so validating.
So what is on your witchy or like ritual playlist?
I listen to a lot of classical soundtracks. I don't know particularly why. A lot of them end up being like soundtracks from kind of like historical movies, which is ironic because I haven't seen any of the movies. But but anything that feels timeless to me really kind of puts me in that mindset. And then, you know, it varies depending on my mood. I'll listen to like trap music and meditate, you know. It just depends on like what I'm really trying to bring in. But in the morning, I really try to listen to something that's kind of like classical and timeless. I really love Latin hymns. I love anything that has like a Catholic feel to it. I don't know why I really love that music. Maybe because I grew up in Brazil, but it just has like a really, I don't know, kind of feels like home in a way. But yeah, I don't have like a master playlist that I hit up every time.
Yeah, I love that. Just like from like ancient hymns to trap music, like it's like whatever you're feeling that day.
I never thought of that. Yeah, I guess so.
I feel like that is just like so like modern mystic, you know, like
Yes.
you can see the magic in anything. And I think there's just so much power in that.
Yeah.
Okay, last question. Who is your favorite witchy influencer?
I would say Joanna DeVoe for sure.
Mm.
I think she was the first podcast I ever even listened to, like not just witchy podcasts. I was working retail and I was working like on overnights, and I needed something to like binge listen to keep me awake while I was stocking shelves. And I found her podcast, and I listened to like 100. I was just night upon night.
Like you could just listen forever. She has hundreds of episodes at this point.
She's on like 400, I would say, or 350 at least. But yeah, I listened for nights and nights and nights and nights. And I think that's where I got kind of like, I had always been spiritual and I'd like dipped my toe in, but that's where I like started to get really into it.
Mm-hmm. I feel like Joanna just like has that effect on people. Like she's just that person who you could just listen to her talk forever and never get sick of it.
Yeah.
Oh wait, there's one more question I almost forgot. Do you have a familiar?
I have a dog. You can probably hear her collar right now, but I mean, I have a really special connection with her, but she doesn't stick around when I'm doing anything ritualistic, you know? I did have a dream once that she was a dog that was taken away from me when I was a kid. Like I had the dream that I was with this dog as a child, and what happened was my dad took the dog away because the dog was biting everything and chewing everything. But I had this dream that when he took the dog away, someone else adopted the dog and the dog ended up dying, and that she came back as that dog. So I don't know if there's any truth to that or not, but I do have a really special connection with her, but she doesn't stick around when I'm doing anything ritualistic.
Yeah, I feel like familiars don't always do that. You know, like sometimes they're like, hey, I'm going to be here during this tarot reading. And other times they're like, I'm going to go bounce off the walls, but no, I got you.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So I am really excited to dive into your story. So obviously I've known you for a while and I know, you know, the parts of your story that we've talked about and all of that, but I would love to just kind of hear the whole thing, you know, how you found your magical path. And because I know, I feel like you just have a very magical eye. Like you're somebody who just sees magic in even the most mundane things and causes people to see things in a new light. So what is your story of kind of discovering this path? Have you always seen things really intuitively, or did you kind of have like an awakening?
Well, I mean, I started, again, dipping my toe in spirituality, I would say probably when I was like 15. But I think when it all like really, really exploded is I had been working for this company for 7 years. It was a big retail company. And I had worked my way up from like cashier to manager. And I just kind of like woke up suddenly. I don't even know exactly how it happened, and just asked myself, like, what am I doing? Why am I here? I don't even like this. Like, why am I spending all my time here? It's like I just woke up and my whole life had happened and I wasn't really like paying attention to it. I wasn't calling the shots. I was just on autopilot. I was on this really dangerous autopilot where I was going to school full time and working full time because that's what people thought was a good idea. And I just had this is like really bullet point story to make it short, but I had this massive breakdown. I ended up like quitting my job, breaking my lease, leaving my apartment, which I loved, moving back in with my parents, which I said I would never do, love them to death, but I said I would never do it. And I just told myself, like, I want to start a business. And I started cycling through all of these different business ideas, one after the other. And then finally, I ended up on antidepressants. I ended up getting diagnosed with depression. And I was trying to find a way to like pull myself out of it. And I turned to like affirmations because I had been into spirituality. And it wasn't really working for me because a lot of affirmations, you have to be in the right mindset. Not that affirmations are bad, they can work, absolutely. But you have to be in the right mindset. And if you're saying things like, I am wealthy, when you have no job and you live at your parents' house and you're trying to like start a business, you know, the conscious part of your mind is like, no, you're not. This sucks, you know? So I started thinking of just like, what are universal truths that I could tell myself that are true and that are expansive and that are magical and that are going to give me that grounding feeling. And I did that and I made them into cards. And that's how I started making those oracle cards that started selling on Etsy. Because I just, in that moment, I needed something that was both magical and mystical and expansive and made me feel like the possibilities are endless. But it also had to be 100% true because my mind was not in a place where you can't tell me the truth, you know? So that's really how it all started. And it just all started snowballing from there. I started getting all these ideas and connecting with people, but it was all from like that breakdown to breakthrough, you know?
Oh, I know all too well. So was there kind of ever a like coming out of the broom closet moment for you, or have you always just kind of been that sort of person that people think is a little magical?
You know, I mean, my parents have always known. I have to really applaud them. They were very open-minded. My mom got me my first like witchcraft book. She bought me my first deck. But it's not something that like I shared with people at work. You know, if it doesn't come up like organically in conversation, I don't make a point to let's talk about it. But I feel like if I ever had a coming out of the broom closet moment, it would probably be now. Just because in my business, I'm finally reaching out to that niche market that's been reaching out to me this entire time. I'm finally saying, you know, like, I'm an occultist. I believe in some form of occult, and this is my business. It's super spiritual. And I just started planning posts and Instagram where I'm finally going to start including like more witchy things into the photography, which I hadn't done before. Before I called my cards like consciousness cards. Now it's just a straight up oracle because that's what it is. I think I was trying to like appeal to everyone maybe, or maybe it was just fear. But I think if there was ever like a coming out of the broom closet, it's probably right now. But like my closest family and everything, they've always known. It was actually my dad. I was really young. I was like, I don't know, I want to say 10 or something, and I found a book that he had on herbs, and like I guess there was a portion on witches. And I was reading it, and my dad looks at me and is like, "Oh, do you like witches?" I'm like, "Yeah, witches are cool." He's like, "Well, that's good. I'm glad you have that interest." And I'm like, "But witches are bad." And my dad's like, "Witches were just women who knew about nature. Witches were not bad. Like, witches are good." And that almost kind of gave me like the validation to start slowly going down that path as I got older.
I love that your parents were so not only supportive, but like actually encouraging, which is unusual. I feel like
it is. When I hear other people's stories, I feel really lucky. My dad never really had like a religion. He studied Buddhist philosophy for a long time when he was doing Tai Chi for probably like a decade. And my mom's always been Christian, and she had a small window when I said that I didn't believe in anything, where she was kind of afraid that I was going to go to hell. But I mean, that's to be expected when you believe in a certain religion, you don't want your kid to go to hell. You know what I mean? And it was a very small window, and it wasn't like any epic argument or anything. It was really just a genuine fear. But I feel really lucky when I hear other people's stories. They were always very supportive.
Mm-hmm. I love that. So what would you actually say is the ideal client or the ideal customer for your brand and your oracle? Because your cards are just so expansive. Like, you have so many different packs of cards. There's so many different kinds of like questions and thoughts on them. But I know, like, because we've talked about it, that you've mentioned that you want people to kind of just open their eyes and maybe have some kind of awakening by asking themselves questions. Like, who would you say really needs to benefit from that process?
I would say the person who's ready to see the magic in reality. I think we get really caught up in fantasy like Harry Potter because it's easy to. But I mean, for example, if you watch Harry Potter and then you watch a really good science documentary on the planet Earth, I mean, the effect that it gives you, it's like the same thing. It's so expansive. It's so insane. And I feel like maybe just young people in general could benefit from that. I mean, really, my ideal client is the young woman who's ready to just take on the world and ready to make her fantasy her reality. Like, it's the same thing. They don't need to be super far apart. It doesn't need to be a dream. We can do it now.
Yeah, I love that. And it's so true, because magic is real life, but I feel like what separates the muggles from the witches is that you're willing to see it.
It's exactly it. That's what my whole brand, you just like encompassed it. Yes.
Yeah, it's so true though, because I mean, we all have these things that we have to do that we consider mundane. Like, either you have a job, or you have the mundane tasks of your business, or the mundane tasks of taking care of your home or your family, like whatever it is. And you can just so easily get sucked into feeling like your life is boring or meaningless, or not even just that it's meaningless, but that a lot of the things you're doing are just meaningless and you kind of take it for granted. But I feel like magic is not always about escaping from those things as much as it's about realizing that you can actually derive so much power out of being present as you're doing those things, or just being present with everything. Every detail is an opportunity for some kind of awakening or some kind of self-actualization. So, like, would you say that that's what each one of your cards is meant to do, to just kind of draw attention to like one little thing, so people's heads are not, because we get lost so easily,
Yeah, it's meant to be exactly that. It's meant to be a reminder of just how amazing this current reality is and how the possibilities are truly infinite. I mean, we live in a universe where black holes are a thing. You know what I mean? Like, if black holes are a thing, then is it really super impossible for you to get your dream job or start your business? Like, when you start thinking of the reality of our universe and all the mysteries and all the things that we still don't know and all of the possibility, it makes our dreams seem so small and so achievable. You know what I mean? It just makes you realize that anything is possible, truly, but you have to start perceiving things differently in order to get there.
Absolutely. So I know this is going to be recorded and be on the audio podcast, but for the people who are watching it on YouTube, do you happen to have any cards handy? Like, I would love to just kind of see the process of like drawing a card and like getting whatever you're supposed to get out of it. Like a demonstration would be amazing.
I think I have. Well, I'm going to show you. I don't have the old ones because the older ones that were on Etsy, the digital downloads are still available, but I don't do physical copies anymore. But the new deck, the Perception deck, I'm sending off to a publisher, and I had a prototype made. Okay, so here's one.
Ooh, I
just
love
go ahead
that.
And read it. So it's dreams of the deceased, their smiles in suspension, confuse us in our sleep, dangled between dimensions. We feel them in the flesh and believe without negation. When the dead walk through the mind, vivid dream or visitation.
Oh my gosh, so magical and just like mysterious.
Right. So I spent so much time on this. I spent a year developing this. So when I first started the business, this was the main intention. But I didn't know how to do it, how to write it, how to formulate it, how to make it something that I could even sell. And even now, I still have my doubts about it. It might just be fear, but I feel like they're just kind of poetic reminders. So here's another one. Our omnipotent moon, oceans obey her pull. It's no surprise our hidden sides act out an impulse when she's full. So the whole point is just taking things that are real and making them poetic and mysterious and just kind of reminding people of, I don't know, how amazing the world is, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. So like, how would you suggest people use the cards? Like maybe just during their practice, just like pull one of them and just maybe do some journaling or some contemplating. Like what are they meant to do with them?
I would suggest, personally, I do like a one a day to just kind of like set the tone. But even, and it's crazy because I created them, but even if I'm having a moment where I just feel like everything is crap, I will go through and just start reading them kind of slowly and intentionally one by one, because these aren't necessarily, a lot of decks you have like channeled messages where, you don't draw a tarot card and then draw another tarot card and then draw another tarot card and another, because then it just starts losing meaning unless you're doing, like a spread or something like that. But any reader will tell you don't sit there with an oracle deck and just like read each one of them like it's all going to make sense to you, but this is different. These are poems that are meant to evoke a feeling in you. So if you're having a day where you feel like everything is crap, you can read it like a book. So my intention with it is that each one of them is going to have, this one doesn't have a title. Most of them have a title in Latin, and then they have a number. So I'm going to number all of them, and they're going to read like one giant poem if someone decides to do that.
So cool.
Yeah. So, I spent a long time on it because I want to say I spent 8 or 9 months just coming up with different concepts of what's real and makes me feel expansive, what's real and still makes me feel magical. And then I had to write poetry around it, which was really difficult. I didn't get to just sit under a tree and let inspiration come however it did. There were moments where I had like a lot of inspiration and I just went at it, but I was really trying to write things around specific concepts that would kind of evoke certain feelings in people, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like what would you say has been the biggest challenge along your path that has kind of led to you being able to have this awakening of seeing magic in basic things?
I think living the way I was living, which was, I just straight out of high school, I went into school and work and full-time with both and balancing it. And I was just doing things because it was what other people would deem acceptable. And it's like my life had no beauty. You know what I mean? Like there was nothing that I appreciated. And now that I'm kind of like out of that cave and out of that void, I'm just appreciating everything, you know? I mean, when I first got out of that job, I was like, man, I don't have to work 16 hours a day. This is amazing. What a gift. You know?
Every moment of the day is now a magical gift.
Yes. I think it just gave me like a whole new lease on life where I started really noticing things and just realizing how amazing everything is. It just gave me a new perspective entirely.
Mm-hmm. Amazing. So what has been the most rewarding part of just having this whole journey and this whole experience?
The people for sure. I mean, when I first started this, I mean, I had no idea what it even was. You know, I had no idea. I was making cards and like hand stamping them and putting things that I thought were cool on there and just putting them out on the internet, you know?
I mean, that's art. So all
right.
art starts with experimentation and then it takes on a meaning later.
Right, yeah. Just me at 3 a.m. with a stamper at my table. But you know, I put it out there and I just started like genuinely asking people like, what do you think? How would you like to use this? How could I change it? And people messaged me and talked to me and had a dialogue with me and gave me real answers and tried to help me. And these people are all around the globe and I've never met them in my life, but they've been so instrumental along this entire process. And I mean, I have people on my email list or on Instagram that have been with me since like day one, and they've given me an opinion on everything I've done. Like every time I send out a survey, every time I ask a question, they're always giving me opinions. And it's so valuable and so humbling that you're a part of this community that's just so willing to help you along the way. It's crazy.
Yeah, one thing I absolutely love about your brand is that it's very interactive. So like obviously the concept of these cards, if a person is using them, the deck is interactive. But you also seem to kind of approach your like online presence in a way of like, this isn't just me or this isn't just these cards. This is the department, you know, like, and you can be a part of the department. So like, how does that work? Like what does a person need to do to be a member of the department? And, you know, how do they contribute to the community?
So the first step is signing up for the email list, which you can get the link in my Instagram bio or on my website. But the first step is to get in the email list because then you get a link to the Facebook group and you can join a private Facebook group. However, if you don't want to join the Facebook group, a lot of the voting takes place on the email list. That's where I send out surveys and people just email me directly. Like it's not, you know, a bubble that you click. You email me back and tell me exactly what you think, and then I email you back, and we're just having a conversation. At some point, I do want to do maybe like a Discord thread or something like that where we can all just kind of hang out and talk, because it seems like not many people are on Facebook as much these days. But it's really an interactive community where you can hit me up anytime and let me know exactly what you're thinking. So it's been really rewarding.
Really cool. So have people like submitted ideas for the cards or ideas for the decks, or have you kind of come up with all of these ideas on your own?
So all of the main ideas have been my own. People have mostly emailed with, one person emailed me with an idea of like color coding each card for different like themes, which I thought was really cool. I don't use color at all in my business really, but I thought it was a cool idea for maybe the future. And then someone else recommended like breaking up the deck into different things by categories. So a lot of times I'll get emails about kind of how to formulate it. But as far as the writing that I've put into it, no one's ever said anything about it besides that they really like it. So I don't know. Someone could be holding back though. So
everybody share your opinions.
Go DM me. Let me know.
Yeah, I love that it's a kind of a two-way street. It's like, how will you get the most out of this? And like, how can I create this in a way that's going to be super valuable. And I think that's something that a lot of like online business owners and even just content creators sometimes forget, is that like, yeah, it's supposed to be coming from your heart and it's like your thing, but people, you know, it's an art form for people to receive. So
Right.
it's really good to just kind of check in and be like, hey guys, like, what are you getting out of this? What do you want to be getting out of this? How would you rather see this be done? And sometimes just the most amazing things come from that. Like, the next season of this podcast is literally just going to be me talking about topics that people voted on, which is, it's kind of, it goes back to that like freedom within structure concept, because there's a billion and one things that I could talk about that I'm passionate about, but I feel so much more just aligned with, it's like, okay, there's these like 20 things that people really want to talk about. And
Right.
I really want to talk about it too. So let's turn it into a dialogue, you know, and it's just great. The internet is a wonderful place that brings people together. And I know that sounds mushy, but where would any of us be without it right now? I don't know.
It's true. I mean, I feel like if you use it right, it's an incredible tool, you know, if you're using it in the right way and really like genuine and authentic and asking what people want to see.
Yeah, it really is. And I mean, like, I wouldn't know you. I wouldn't know anyone who I've worked with. Like, I wouldn't know.
I'd be so alone right now.
I know, like, I'm, to be honest, part of the reason why I'm so passionate about, you know, just my brand and sharing and connecting about Magick online is because I've pretty much never been around very many people who think about it or like it or approve of it or any of that,
Right.
in, you know, the area that I live in. And so like, I wouldn't know my mentors. I wouldn't know my clients. I wouldn't know my podcast guests. I wouldn't know my podcast listeners. I wouldn't know any of these amazing people who I consider like my community if we didn't have the internet. It's just crazy to think about that, you know?
It is.
Like,
yeah, if someone took it away, we'd be doomed.
oh my gosh, like even just 10 years ago, you know, it was a completely different situation. So it's so good.
Yeah.
So I love to kind of wrap these up with like some kind of a tip or some kind of takeaway that our listeners can kind of glean from your overall message. So like if you could kind of just leave people with one thing, what would that be?
I would say to go about your day and ask yourself, how can I perceive this to my benefit?
Mm-hmm.
When things happen to you, or when things aren't going your way, or even when you're just doing mundane tasks, you know, how can I do this intentionally? How can I perceive this differently? How can I make this benefit me in some way? And you'll begin to see a shift really quickly.
Yeah, I love that. So many people look at the things around them either as completely haphazard or like arbitrary. Or unfortunately, a lot of people are like, oh, why is this happening to me? Like, this is
Right.
so annoying. Like, and we all do it, you know,
Yeah.
I do it sometimes too. But like, I would have to say one of the most beneficial things I've ever experienced is just that ability to think outside the box and see how something could be benefiting me in like a backwards kind of unexpected way. And I feel like that's exactly kind of like what the message of your brand is. And I think it's just so good that you're sharing that with so many people, because people really freaking need that, like really badly.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much. That's so validating.
So let's just wrap these up with a magical story as per usual. So like just the most magical thing that's happened to you, or like a synchronicity or anything like that. So I'll go first to give you a chance to think. So I haven't recorded an interview in a long time. So it's actually been a while since I've had to come up with one of these. I think the most magical thing that has happened to me recently has actually been, for some reason, being drawn out of the like witchy and spiritual boss babe community of like girly witchy people and spiritual people, and actually starting to pay attention to like more masculine thought leaders recently. I don't know why, but in the past year or two, I've just been like very woman centric. And I think that part of that is just because there's been this huge movement of like women thought leaders and boss babes and all of that, which is cool. But at the same time, I'm all about balancing masculine and feminine energy. So it was kind of messed up that I was like almost completely neglecting, listening to anyone with more of a masculine perspective or a masculine persona. So in the past few months, I just randomly, I reconnected with somebody who I used to love on like YouTube years ago, who's a guy. And then I also just discovered some guys that are like sharing really cool things in the world. And I was like, dude, why did I pass this up for such a long time? And like, not only is it just a breath of fresh air and, just more all encompassing and, getting to meet people in their communities who are not just all a bunch of girls, but it's also just for the concept of balancing masculine and feminine energy. I can actually see my own life differently, and I can see my own decisions and my own business and my own lifestyle and all of these things just from like a different perspective than what I'm able to get from just like pouring divine feminine energy all over everything.
Right. Just slather it on everything.
It was so important, when I first started doing it, because we live in this world that's like masculine dominated and blah, blah, blah. But it gets to a point where you're so immersed in that you almost can't see what do they say? You can't see the woods for the trees or whatever.
I have no clue.
But whatever that saying is. But yeah, it's been really cool to kind of just reincorporate some masculine energy, and not just the kind of masculine energy of like working all the time or being super ambitious or whatever, but like just masculine energy, like even in a spiritual way, or just like seeing things differently. So that's been my magical thing. What about you?
I don't know if it's super magical, but a couple of days ago, actually, so recent, I had yet another moment where I was like, what am I doing? Like, I think it was because I was going over my giant to-do list of all the different things that I needed to do. And I was just kind of thinking about how I've been at this for a year and I'm still not exactly where I want to be. And I just started getting really frustrated with myself. And I was just really, really upset. And I was just basically like, if I'm supposed to do this, I need a sign. Like, I need a sign soon. I need a sign. Someone tell me that I'm supposed to be doing this. Otherwise, I'm just going to quit and I'm just going to get another manager job and I'm just going to live my life that way. And so I'm walking to my car all pissed to get my Starbucks, And so I'm trying to listen to music on the way to get my coffee, and it keeps stopping. Like, Spotify just keeps freezing every 5 seconds. And by this time I'm in the drive-through and I'm just looking like a crazy person, like stabbing my phone with my finger, trying to get it to work, until eventually I'm just like, ugh. And I take my phone and I throw it. Like, I'm so angry. I throw it on the passenger seat. And when I look up, the driver's, like, the license plate in front of me is 444. And then when I pull up to get my coffee, for some reason, it's always like 3 something, but for some reason that day it was $4.44. And so I was like, okay, I can live with that.
So what does the number 4 mean to you?
So recently I've been seeing it a lot. For me, I feel like it just means that something or someone is out there guiding you, if that makes sense. Recently I've been seeing 42 a lot everywhere, and I haven't really read into it. I know that 444 by default, most people say it means like a spirit guide or someone is with you, but just 444 and 42, I've been seeing those combinations everywhere lately.
Interesting. Did you happen to catch my like Instagram stories like a month and a half ago when everything was 4s and 2s?
Yes, I did. And I think I messaged you and I said, me too. And you sent me a link and I don't think I ever read it.
Oh my gosh, read it. Like, and I feel like if you're seeing 4s and 2s and you're in that stage where you're like trying to figure out if you're fully grounded in something and if you're on the right path and all of that, like definitely read up on the 4s and 2s thing, because like 4 and 2 are both like, they're both stable numbers because they're even numbers. So they're kind of about building a foundation on like stable ground. And in order to do that, sometimes you have to kind of feel like you're not stable in order to understand what would make you feel stable, you know, and then you end up kind of building on that. I feel like that was kind of the overall gist that I got from it, but you might get something different. But yeah, that the 4s and 2s were just very crazy for me a couple months ago too. So I totally get that.
Okay. Yeah, that feels like it would make a lot of sense. I'm definitely going to have to read up on it.
Yeah, numbers, man, they're interesting. I've never been like a huge number person. A lot of the time I just like I see them and I'm like, oh, that's cool. Maybe that means something. But like in the past year, I've really kind of leaned into it. And we also had like a numerologist on the show a while back. And ever since then, I've been like, yeah, dude, let's all look into numbers. So that is super magical. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. And I would love to just introduce the audience to where they can find you. I love to follow your Instagram because there's just always incredibly magical images and stories and messages on there. But is there anywhere else where people can connect with you as well?
Yeah, so I just launched my website. It's thepossibilitydepth.com. And then if you join the email list, you will have access to the private Facebook group and you can hit me up on there as well. And I also have my podcast, which is just the Possibility Department.
Yes, I'm so excited that you've launched your podcast. Yay!
It took me so long. You had been getting on to me about the whole podcast thing for like, probably like 10 months, 9-10 months. But I hit pause on it while I was working on the website. So only the first episode is up, but here in a day or two, the second one should be up. So I'm really excited.
Amazing. I'm going to go listen to that because I feel like you just get on these amazing rambles and it's like, this is the most magical thing I've ever heard. And it's just you talking about normal thoughts. Like they're normal to me, but to hear that somebody else has them, I'm like, okay, great. I'm not crazy. And I think there's a lot of people out there feeling the same way who just need to connect with another person who thinks deeply about stuff. So that's going to be so freaking cool.
I'm honestly just so glad that I met you. Like 4 or 5 years ago, I guess it was 4 or 5 years ago, I was watching your videos when you did mostly like Wheel of the Year videos. I think that's mostly what you had. And I just remember I was working that retail job at the time. And I just remember like being in my kitchen, watching them and being like, oh, wouldn't it be nice to do something like that on the internet? You know, what a far-fetched dream. And then here I am and like, you're interviewing me. It's so crazy. And you're my coach. And I'm really grateful that I met you.
I'm so grateful that I met you too, because again, I would just be a crazy person floating out here in crazy land if there weren't other crazy soulmate humans out there in the world.
Yeah.
So thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for sharing. And I will talk to you soon. And everybody go listen to that podcast. It will be linked wherever links are, depending on where you're listening to. So yeah, thank you, Luchiana.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for sitting for a spell with us.